Hello and welcome. Thank you so much for joining today's session. This is Thursday Live with Dr. Jen, and I am excited. Yes, I'm excited for today's topic because it is one that I believe this is something that goes unnoticed in many homes, but is causing a lot of harm to our children. Yes, this is another Thursday Live, and I'm so glad that we're able to have this session again. So please, if you're here, let me know where you're tuning in from. Let me know whether you're coming from one of the purpose parenting communities or this is your first time joining one of the Thursday live sessions. I would like to say hi to you. Just drop where you're tuning in from in the comments, and yes, it would be great to hear from you. So today I'm going to be sharing with you on the emotional weapons that every parent must retire. There are certain things that we do as parents, that we must have experienced as children ourselves. It seems so normal. It seems so effective, right? Effective in terms of it delivers the result that we are trying to get. It gets the child to do what we want. It gets us control. But what I would like us to be able to arrive at by the end of this session is for you to be able to see that not every method should be employed when it comes to trying to get your children, to obey or to do what you want, right? When you prioritize control without looking at connection, you are going to lose a lot as a parent. So we're going to be looking at the weapons. What are these weapons? What are these things that we often do as parents it's quite costly, not just to our children, but also to our relationship with our children. I'm sure you'll agree with me that not all weapons are physical. In fact, some of the most powerful weapons that leave wounds that go far beyond childhood are invisible, right? You don't see them. And these weapons don't just leave bruises on the skin, they leave scars on the heart. That's what actually makes them very powerful. That's why I want you to pay attention to some of these things I'm going to be sharing with you in today's session. Please go ahead and share the session with someone else. Invite some other parents to come in and learn. Now, we're going to look at these three weapons that parents use because one of the things that many parents tend to prioritize on their journey is control, right? Parenting would be so easy if you could just snap your finger and your children just do what you want, right? That would be great. Imagine that you could just snap your finger and all the reminding, all the yelling, all the things that you often do just to get what needs to be done. You don't need to go through all of that, right? Your kids, you just need to snap your finger and your children will just do everything you want. Yeah, that might sound like a dream. It might sound like something that, every parent might want. But at the same time, you realize that if you succeed to get such an accomplishment on your job, if you succeed to get your children to do every single thing that you want, that also means that they're not thinking for themselves. That means that you're raising children who are not able to think for themselves. Because if you're dealing with people who have their own brains, who have their own minds, who have their own thought processes, that's usually why sometimes people don't agree with you or don't see things the way you see them because they have a mind of their own. And that is a good thing. All right, it's a good thing. Yes, it makes parenting more challenging, but it's a good thing. It's a good thing that you have a child that can think. It's a good thing that you have a child who is able to see things differently from you because you're not raising a mini version of yourself. You're raising a child. You're raising, someone who is going to go out into the world tomorrow to fulfill God's plan for their life, to fulfill God's purpose for why they are here on earth. And most of the time, it has nothing to do with, who you are and how you think. Your child has to be able to think differently to be able to succeed at what it is that they have to accomplish here on earth. Now, this is if you think of it in this way, sometimes it helps you to be less frustrated by the fact that your kids don't always listen or don't always do exactly what you want, right? And that also calls you to a higher purpose, to become more skillful, all right, in your training, in how you give instructions. Because sometimes it's not really just the fact that the child doesn't want to do what you want, but it's also how you're giving the instruction. It's also the fact that you're not, able to bring your child to a place where you can reason together. I mean, even in the scriptures, God invites us to come and reason together with Him. Isn't that amazing? So it's a scripture that points to the fact that even our heavenly Father, he has given us free will. He has given us, a mind. We are able to think for ourselves. All right, but somehow we want to take all of that away from our children, and that's usually one of the reasons why many parents will find themselves, constantly using some of the weapons we're going to be talking about today. And if you have not yet read my book called Connected on Purpose, right? Now, this book is going to help you understand why it's important for you to prioritize connection over control. It's going to be a game changer for you on your parenting journey, because the tendency is for parents to prioritize control. Because, like I said earlier, sometimes we just want to give instructions, just have the children doing exactly what we say when we say, without any hesitation. I mean, only a robot can do that. And sometimes even the robots will ask you a question back. Are you sure that's how you want me to do it? So if you're thinking that your parenting will be easier if your kids would just do exactly what you say, when you say it, how you say it, without any argument, then you're saying you want to raise your child, or you want your child to be like a robot. But like I said earlier, even robots sometimes will ask you a question back. I say, are you sure that this is exactly how you want to do it? All right. So if you're raising a human being who has a mind of their own, then of course they're going to see things differently from you at different points. And one of the things you want to nurture in your children is the ability to think for themselves. And that is easier said than done. So if you've not read my book, I encourage you to do, because in it you're going to learn why connection should always be prioritized over control. Now, again, here is one truth that you must remember. It will be far too costly for us to get our children to the point where they are too afraid to think for themselves. They are too afraid to even contemplate anything different from what you've said, because you're not always right. It takes humility to acknowledge that fact that as a parent, you don't know everything and you're not always right. Sometimes the way your child sees it could be better than what you're saying. I can't tell you how many times my kids, even in their tender years, have pointed out an error I was making, have pointed out a better way of doing something. Now imagine that I was a kind of parent that did not give room for them to express themselves, for them to be able to air, their thoughts, how they see things or what they think. It means that we just, the whole family will just be carrying on in error. So you trust me, you don't want a child that cannot think for themselves, because it will make it very difficult for them to discover, talk less of pursue their own life purpose. Now, raising a child who does everything you say is not the goal, because it will not serve them when it comes to living their own life. It won't serve them. All right. Now, emotional weapons are common, like I said earlier, but they are invisible. Sometimes even the victims of these emotional weapons don't realize that these weapons are being used on them, but they feel the effects. We see it in movies. A common scenario, I'm sure, for some of us who have watched or who are fond of watching Nigerian movies, you must have seen some of those scenes where maybe the mother-in-law starts crying and she's saying to her son, "If you loved me, you would do what I say." For some of us, this is not even just a movie. This might be something you've experienced in real time, where someone is, someone that you love is using that line to get you to do what they want because you have aired a contrary opinion. And they use that line, they bring out that line as their last card to get you to do what they want. How did it make you feel in that moment? That's manipulation. That's classic emotional manipulation. So that's just a bid to try to manipulate you into doing something that you've clearly said that you don't want to do. So we all agree that it is wrong. We all agree that it's something that it's manipulative, right? But what about when parents use those same tactics with their children? Is it still wrong? But you'll agree with me that this is something that is not uncommon. Many parents finally get to the point where they have to use lines. You have to use lines like, "If you love me as your mother, you will not do this." If those kinds of statements that leverage love for obedience, putting the child, in a corner where they have to either pick between what they want and their parent. And of course, a child who is dependent, whose parents like they're everything. Because when a child is young, their parents like they're everything, right? So of course that there is no discussion. When once you bring that up, there's no discussion, but it is very manipulative and it has a cost. We're going to look at that as we go ahead. All right. So often we are so focused on gaining control, on winning the battle in the moment, that we sacrifice connection with our children. And our children don't stop paying the price. They end up paying a price with wounds that will go far beyond their childhood. But we don't realize it because in the moment we are so focused on getting what I want now. I just want this child to stop this behavior. And yet the intentions are good. Good intentions are hardly ever the issue. Most parents who find themselves using these weapons over and over is because they have good intentions. They see their child going on a path that will end up in destruction or that will lead the child to a place where they don't want the child to end up. And they are scrambling for whatever thing they can use. That's why knowledge and growth is so important on your parenting journey. Because without the right skills, without you knowing what to do, you'll find yourself scrambling for just every possible thing that you can do to get your child, to do what you want. So I shared the story of the parent. For those of you who saw my post before this particular session, I shared the story about the parent who, gave her son silent treatment. This is not a fictional story. This is something that, I had to take permission from the parents to be able to share. And it's a recent session. So this parent shared with me about. So she actually this conversation started because she was trying to show me the tactics that she uses to get her kids to do whatever she wants. That's how we got into this conversation. And in the course of the conversation, she shared with me how she had once gone for a whole month without talking to her son because of something that he had done. And this is something that she had tried to, correct in the past, and he kept on doing it. He had promised not to do it again, and then yet he did it again. And she was so upset. She decided to punish him by going on silent treatment, putting him on silent treatment for 1 full month. Imagine living in the home with your parent, your beloved parent, and for 1 month you see each other. You see this parent talking with every other person, but the parent just acts as though you don't even exist. All right. I've actually seen a skit where someone was talking about the tactics that parents used to use in those days, and this was one of the tactics that was mentioned. I think this was actually number one. How they actually preferred to be beaten, to be shouted at, the parents should do anything to them but that one because it is so painful. It's an invisible but very powerful weapon. Silent treatment. 1 month, a child. Every day, this child sees you interacting with their siblings, laughing, enjoying life. The moment the child walks in, she says she'll walk out of the room, just to make the child know that she doesn't want to be where the child is. Every time the child will come to say something to her, she'll act as though nobody's talking to her. Just quiet. And some parents are very good, can actually do this without uttering a single word. I've also heard a story of a young girl who got pregnant, and the parents' way of communicating their dissatisfaction or their disappointment with what had happened was by ignoring her. I think she said it went on for a year or so. I think that's the highest I've ever heard. I don't know if you've heard of cases of silent treatment, or maybe you've experienced it yourself growing up. But this is something that is very common, not just between parents and their children, but treatment. And sometimes it goes on for pretty long. Imagine sleeping on the same bed with someone and you haven't talked to them for maybe a month or even a week or even a day. All right. You are in the same space, in the same room, you just see each other, ignore each other, and you just pass. Silent treatment is a very common weapon, emotional weapon that people often use when they are trying to either punish someone for something they have done or trying to pass a message that they're not happy with something. So imagine that the opposite of communication, of course, is silence. But we know that communication is one of the tools that we use to resolve problems. But instead of resolving problems, they resort to silence, meaning that you're not even talking about. Sometimes the child does not even know what they did wrong. Sometimes the child doesn't know what they did wrong. I've heard of cases where the child did not even know what exactly it is they did to deserve that kind of treatment from their parents. So imagine suffering, feeling like you're worthless, feeling like, your parent doesn't love you anymore, doesn't want you, you feel rejected, but you don't even know what it is that your parent is really angry about. Because in the case of this lady, this child was not even sure. Yes, of course, he realized that it was after this thing he did that the mother stopped talking. But the span of it, he was not sure. So it's frustrating, all right? And At first, this particular child in the story, he cried, he begged, he came to her at some point, begging her, crying, Mama, please, I'm sorry, I will not do it again. I don't know what it is you're really angry about, but if it is this thing, I will not do it again. I'm sorry, and all of that. But she just kept silent because she had purpose in her heart to take it on for 1 month so that he would get the message. And then she tells me at the end of her conversation that, he never did it again, it worked. So, yes, it did work, all right, in terms of the child not repeating the behavior in front of you or to the best of your knowledge, it did work. But what was the price for that method that you used? What was the cost? How did it affect his personality? How did it affect, how he relates with you? Is he always walking on eggshells? Because trust me, anyone that could, would treat you in that manner, you become very cautious because it is so. Silent treatment has a way that it affects you. I don't know if you've had, has anyone ever given you the silent treatment before? Let me hear you in the comments. There is something about it that it just makes you helpless. It is such a powerful weapon. It makes you helpless because you're trying to talk it out. The person doesn't want to talk. The person doesn't even want to be in your presence. It makes you feel like maybe you have shit all over you. All right. It is such a potent emotional weapon. So powerful. And then imagine using it on a child who is still learning, who is still, understanding maybe their emotions, still finding their way in the world. So if using it on adults is so powerful, then imagine what it does to a child. Imagine the wounds that it will leave on the child. So yes, it worked. Yes, it will get the child to stop doing what you don't want. And for me, I always say it will get the child to stop doing it in front of you because again, to really say you discipline a child is where you get the child to the point where the child is not doing it because they are afraid of what you will do, but because they have learned that this is right and this is wrong, whether you are there or you're not. That's true discipline. It's about getting a child to be able to choose, to make the right choices, to lead themselves even in your absence. So when we use these techniques, we just bring our children to the point where they start walking on eggshells because now the child will become so cautious around you. The child will be afraid that I might do something and then I still get, to be treated the way I was treated before. Because it leaves such an imprint on the individual mentally that it makes you to become so, they call it walking on eggshells. I can't think of a better word for it. Right? So, did this method simply teach that child that the mother's love can be withdrawn? Worthy of the parent's attention. That silence equals rejection. Silent treatment does not build obedience, it builds fear. All right? It builds fear. It builds fear. So, fear is not the foundation of a healthy parent child bond. Respect and fear are not the same thing. Fear is not the foundation of a healthy parent child bond. So, yes, I have been a victim and I've also used it. I love how honest you are. But the truth is, for most people, I didn't get silent treatment from any of my parents growing up. It was not part of the tactics that my parents used. All right, they didn't use that. So it's not something that I'm familiar with. I'm the type who would want to talk it out. I need to talk it out. So I don't understand silent treatment because I never experienced it as a child. Yes, from other people, maybe your friend in school, or how in primary school friends would your friend's not talking to you. I think that's the only level, but that deep level between a parent and their child, I never experienced that growing up. But what I've realized is that most parents who habitually use this tool or use this weapon, it's not a tool, it's a weapon, right, may have also experienced it as children. All right. Now, this is very generic, but for most cases, it's true. If your parents use it as a weapon, even though it hurts you, you find yourself still trying to apply the same weapon to your own children. Because yes, it hurt you, but then it got you to do what your parent wanted. So you're like, it means it worked, but you forgot how it made you feel. And one thing you must realize on our parenting journeys is the fact that your children will not remember what you say as much as they will remember how you made them feel. How you made them feel. It's so amazing to to be around someone or to build your relationship with your child to the point where your child knows that even at my worst, I can still go to my parent. And that is the standard. That's where we want to get it to be. We want our children to be reassured that even when they make mistakes, they are still welcome. So remember this, in the Bible, I love one of my favorite stories in the Bible, the story of the prodigal son. Because it is such a lesson for us parents. I often ask parents this question, right? If your son were that prodigal son in that story, would your child know that in my father's house, even if I may not still be at the level of a son, at least they will not send me away? And have the courage after doing all those grievous things to still come back to you. So there are some weapons that we use, there's some tactics that we use that closes that door for our children, that tells them, if you mess up here, you're not welcome. And parenting is a lifelong assignment. It's not something that you can put down and pick up whenever you feel like. It's a lifelong assignment. So your child, you are still a guide for your child, no matter how old they are. Ideally, you should remain a guide. But most parents close those doors. So most parents are raising children in a manner that tells the child, or that gets the child to say, I can't wait until I can be free. That's the kind of child that will leave and not turn to you for advice. I'm sure we know of so many cases of children who would never turn to their own parents for advice or for counsel or share their struggles with their own parents. Why? Some of these emotional wounds close that door because the child knows that with my parents, I'll find shame. My parent will not give me understanding. My parent will not be able to, I will not find the understanding that I need at this moment of crisis in my life. And they'll prefer to turn to strangers. That's why connection is so crucial because you want to correct your children, but you also want to let them know that yes, you will mess up, but always know that here you will find correction, but you will also find acceptance. And silent treatment does not communicate that. In fact, none of these tools communicate that. Sorry. So the second weapon I'm going to talk about today is emotional blackmail. This is another very subtle but very common weapon that we use with our children. In fact, we use this. I think it's even more common. I think it's one of the most common emotional weapons. Emotional blackmail. Yeah, it's so subtle. It's so invisible that sometimes someone is using it on you and you don't even realize that it's being used on you. All right. But as you nurture your emotional intelligence, you realize that you become more aware when people are trying to use these tools on you to try to manipulate your emotions to get you to do what they want. So emotional blackmail sounds like, if you don't do this, I won't love you anymore. Or do this, or I'll be disappointed in you forever. If you don't do this, I'll disown you. If you don't do this, just always putting those conditions that tells the child it's either you're doing what I want or you're out. It's either you're doing what I want or I can't love you anymore. So that's conditional love. So in the moment, of course, when a child is young and dependent, it usually gets results. But the child eventually grows to the point where especially when the child is now independent. That's why most parents become, if a particular parent has become so acquainted to using these weapons with their children, and of course, it eventually gets the child to the point where they are bitter. Because every time they want to make a decision that goes contrary to what the parent is saying, even though they have justified or they have good reason, but the parent just wants to force them in their own direction. When the child is dependent, the child, of course, will have no choice. But eventually, it becomes bitterness. And when the child eventually can stand on their feet, the child will want nothing. The child will just, if you want to get angry, get angry. I've actually had a conversation with someone that was, someone with whom I was working at the time, who told me that their parent pulled out a weapon and I was like, okay. And the parent was very upset because it no longer works. Because when the child is little, the child is dependent. Of course, the child has no choice. But as the child grows older, so parents who are used to using these weapons do not develop true communication skills, do not develop true skills that can help them be able to navigate a healthy relationship with their children. So they keep on using these manipulative tactics. All right, and when the child grows older, at some point, hopefully, as the child becomes mature, the child may say, oh, no, I'm over this. I'm no longer going to be a victim of this manipulation of yours. So in the moment, it may get resolved, but what is the cost? Because children learn that love is conditional from this. They learn that affection can be taken away like a toy, which should not be the case. All right? So later in life, they will struggle with relationships. Now, I think I've counseled a number of couples who are currently dealing with this issue. gaslighting, which I'm sure it's everywhere on the media these days, right? Gaslighting, narcissism. People are becoming more aware of it. But before this media age, right? Parents, there are couples that have been struggling with things like this without even realizing that's what's happening. The other person just keeps gaslighting, just keeps, using words, manipulating the other person to try to get them to do what they want. So a parent who constantly uses emotional blackmail will put their child in a position where they will struggle in relationships, particularly if they meet someone who is aware or not, who is immune to these blackmailing tactics, sorry, right? Because they're going to find themselves constantly needing to use this blackmail to try to get other people to do what they want. They try to make them feel bad, try to make them feel, feel those negative emotions that in order to get them to do what they want, instead of just learning how to communicate, learning how to build rapport with other people. So, and you're constantly going to be afraid of rejection. You're going to raise a child that's constantly afraid of being rejected. Why? Because that was the child's fear with you. The child had no emotional safety. The parent-child relationship should be able to build safety for the child. The child should feel safe. The child should be able to know that no matter what, my parent is not going to send me away. So the question I often ask parents, and I'm bringing it back to you, is this: if your child were in big trouble, would they prefer to come to you knowing that you will be angry, but that even in your anger, at least it's better than what they'll face out there? That's a sign that you're winning. If you're able to raise your children to understand this message, to know that no matter what, no matter how bad it is, you can always bring it to me. Because that is what empowers you to do what you're called to do in the life of your child, which is to be a guide, which is to be a teacher. Most parents want their children to come to them in those moments of crisis, the moments when, they're contemplating big decisions. But how many of them have paved the way for their children to bring those things to them? Because it is your job to ensure that that door stays open. Does your child know? And it's not just in saying, because if your interactions have a tone that spells rejection, that spells condition, only when you're good, only when you do what I want, only when there are all those conditions, what you're doing is simply closing the door. Even if you turn around and tell the child later, if something happens, make sure you come to me, always come to me. Yeah, you're saying that. But the tone of your interactions is passing a different message altogether to the child. So blackmail does not build respect, it builds insecurity. The child becomes insecure in themselves and insecure with you. Now, the third weapon I'm going to talk about today is emotional manipulation. Not quite the same thing, all right? Manipulation is about, using your love and all those things, the benefits of your relationship to try to get the other person again to do what you want. After everything I have done for you, this is how you repay me. I'm sure this is a very familiar phrase for some of us here, right? After everything I have done, after all my sacrifice, after all my... So there are parents who every time their child misbehaves, they bring out this line. They bring out that line. After I gave up school, I gave up this, only for you to come and do this, only for you to come and... Every time. So you can imagine how frustrating it feels for the child when every single thing has to be about the price you have paid as a parent. The question is, who sent you? So we leverage, some parents tend to leverage their sacrifice, the things that they have gone through to raise their child. That's your job. That's the job of a parent. The child did not send you. All right. And it is your duty as a parent to do these things. But when you now have to come and leverage it, use it as a bargaining chip to get your child to do what you want, that is called manipulation. You're being manipulative. You're being manipulative. Because the end goal of that statement is to just ensure that the child is always just doing what you want. And this causes your child, in fact, all of these tools will cause you to raise a child who is always hiding. Because, like I said, these weapons are so powerful that You can't really tell. They affect you in a way that even the physical, correction does not affect you like that because the pain finishes. But this one, it stings. It grips you in a way. It's like it captivates your mind and holds you like a prisoner. So it holds you, it keeps the child, it holds you in a place where it's so uncomfortable. So it's so powerful. So this one, it seems small. You make the statement all the time. After everything I went through, this is how you are repaying me. And what kind of, we know this statement, right? Let me hear your version in the comments. After everything I have done for you, after all my suffering, after all I gave up, just for you, this is how you repay me. You went and did this, and you want to quit school. So whenever the child is trying to contemplate it, let's say, for example, let me take a very common example. A child comes to you and tells you, Mom, I don't want to be a medical doctor. I want to be a content creator, or I want to be a musician. What? Are you telling me? And that's where the parent usually flips to manipulation. I gave up this. I did this. I sacrificed that. This is how you want to repay me. Or the parent doesn't want you to marry somebody. They bring out the sacrifice card. So that's manipulation. All right. And it does not build connection. Because now the child will learn that anytime there's something going on that I know is contrary to what my parents said or wanted, I have to hide it. If not, this is how my parents going to make me feel. My parents going to make me feel bad, make me feel ashamed, make me feel. I think another layer of this is the conscience talk. For those who follow me for a while, who heard me teach on discipline, must have heard me talk about the conscience talk. The conscience talk is another weapon, even though I didn't plan, it on my list of weapons to share on today, but I think I need to talk about that. The conscience talk. It's a very common tactic. Let me call it a tactic that parents use to try to get their children to stop maybe certain behaviors, or when they have tried everything, nothing is working, then they bring out. In fact, some parents say that's the only discipline tool I use. I only use conscious talk. And the goal here is to talk. Usually the thermometer that tells the parent that the conscious talk is entering is when the child starts ripping the child, it breaks the child. So sometimes the parent will say, I've heard the parent tell me that when the tears don't come out, I know that I've not yet reached, so I keep going. So usually the goal of the conscience talk is to amplify the child's guilt or shame, and then that will now be used to get the child to change the behavior. And that exactly is the problem with the conscious talk. The fact that, when you amplify shame and guilt like that, it takes away something from the child. It takes away something from the child. Self-esteem goes with that. So you find yourself always, that thing you did was so wicked. So it's not just about the thing, but the problem with the conscious talk is that it focuses more on who the child is in order to do that thing, or who the child, is because of the thing that they did. That was very wicked. You did that you're just. So it functions on trying to get the child to feel bad, feel guilty, amplify it, make it sometimes even look worse than it actually is, just to pass the message across that this thing was bad. So it ends up not only pointing out that the thing was bad, but making the child realize that they are bad for doing the bad thing. So it's literally throwing the baby out with the bathwater. And if you constantly keep using that, it comes at a cost. You see a child that, is always unsure of themselves. The child is always second guessing, always lack of self confidence comes from that. The conscience talk. Because the most skilled parents at giving these powerful conscious talks, usually they find a way, they say, I was trying to make it to enter. I've heard a parent use that word. Try to make it to enter very well. So the goal is to get the child to cry, to feel bad, to feel ashamed. To feel ashamed for what. And usually, most of the times when children do something wrong, they realize that it's wrong, right? There is a certain shame and guilt that comes naturally with those things that they have done. But the conscience talk now seeks to take that one that is there and amplify it to the point where it ends up eroding the child's self esteem. So I know that these weapons don't come from a place of hatred. There's no parent, I think, that uses these weapons. Usually it comes from a place of very good intentions. Very good intentions, not hatred. They often come from maybe exhaustion of having to deal with the same thing over and over. I have spoken, no, I have advised, I have done everything, you know, and yet the habit keeps coming up. Frustration, even desperation. So we want quick results. We just want that thing to go away. We want peace in the moment. But you must ask yourself, am I pushing my child away or am I bringing my child closer? These weapons, do they push the child away? Because if I do something and you amplify my shame, what does shame do? What do you do when you're ashamed? You hide. There's no person who is ashamed and instead comes out open. Shame drives a person into hiding. So any tactics that you're using that amplifies your child's shame, that makes them feel less than themselves, will tell that child, I am not safe with this person when I have made a mistake. And show me one child whose journey will not be full of mistakes. There is none. There is none. I came across a heartbreaking post on Facebook where a parent was sharing about how he went and I think got I think he adopted or I don't know, got the girl as a nanny or something. She's 10. I think this is in Nigeria, it's not even in Cameroon. And this girl came to his house, and I think the very first week or so, he found the child, playing, trying to play with the socket. And he panicked. He thought she was going to get electrocuted, and he got her well beaten. And because of that, I think this very next day, the child ran away. That was the first time the child ran away. So he finally succeeded to find the child and all of that. And when the child ran away, the child told the stranger the child made that, oh, in that house, they beat me too much. I'm afraid they don't accept. That's what the child said. So after that incident, the child went to school the next week, I think. And while at school, the first week, the child lost almost all of the books. Again, the parent got upset, which is understandable, got the child well beaten. The next day, the child ran away for the second time. At this time around, when the parent found that child, the parent took that child back to the child's biological parents. And the biological parents pleaded and sent the child back with him. So the message this child got was, I'm not wanted at my parents. The child's parents told this man that we have given you this child. Oh, this child comes here, just know that we'll send the child away because we don't have any means to take care of this child. This child is your child. You send the child away, the child can also come back here. So the child understood that I can't find a place home, and at this same place too, I don't feel accepted here. So this man was asking, what should he do? How can he get this child to stop running away, to stop, going around telling strangers that they're not treating her well when they're doing all in their power to treat her well. So sometimes the things we do ends up or communicating to children that they're not welcome here. We don't realize it. And it is not the good intention that is the problem. It is the message that you're passing that is the problem. What message is the child getting? Is it safe to make mistakes here? Am I safe? Is it safe for me to fail here? And show me one child. Because if I were that child, that would also be my mindset. It's not safe to fail here. So this child has never been to school before. I go to school the first week. I don't know how to take care of books. I lose my book. I think I responded to that post and I shared that parent. There were so many comments. I just added mine to it. And I said, maybe you've not considered it, but have you thought about teaching this child how to be careful with their books? Because sometimes we don't realize that there is a how. It's not enough to just tell a child, when you go to school, take care of your books. How? What does that look like? What are the things I need to do to ensure that my books are taken care of? What does it look like? After class, what do I do? Maybe write your name on the book. Maybe don't leave that. So sometimes walk the child through it. So I just pointed it out. I said, and also, watch the message you're passing to the child. Sometimes we tell some of these children that if you do that thing again, I will send you back to your parents' house. What does that tell the child? It's not safe if I fail here, I lose my place. And I can't see myself not failing because I'm going to fail. Children know that they're going to fail eventually because that's what childhood is about. Mistakes, failures, over and over and over because they are learning. So this child was between the devil and the deep blue sea. I can't go back home. My parents will send me back. They'll beat me and probably drive me. I can't go back to the house after I've lost my books. They're going to drive me. They're going to send me away. So what do? I run away. That's the only logical thing for a child to do in that kind of scenario. I'm sure I've heard of stories of kids who have also come, into houses in the city from the village and eventually running. Why are they running away? Because I'm between the devil and the deep blue sea. Which do I choose? If I go here, there's no better. I turn here, there's no better. So there are certain tactics that we use in the course of trying to get our kids to do the right thing. The intention is good, but the message that we pass across to the children tells them it's not safe here. This place, we don't tolerate mistakes here. If you make a mistake, you're out. If you do this, I will disown you. The parents have constantly tell their kids, I will disown you. That's a clear message. That's why you see a child gets pregnant and would rather go and, listen to their friends and go and try to do some funny things because the parent had made it clear that if that kind of thing should ever happen, don't bother. Don't bother. You are no longer a member of this family. So I tell parents, don't use those kinds of statements with your children. Those kinds of ultimatums. Close the door. It tells the child, this door is closed. Don't come back here. Again, if you were to raise the prodigal son, will he know that he can come back home? After messing up like that. I mean, that is pro max mess up. Because when I read that story, it's a very challenging story. I read it most at different points in my journey. I love going back there to read the story to reflect. Because it helps you review your approach to parenting. Can my child, after messing up that much, come back home with their mess, covered in all of their mess? Can they bring it back? Will I be as gracious as the father of the prodigal son to not only receive the child, but to make a feast for the child that tells the child, this is always home and we are always glad to receive you here? So that's the challenge for us. All right? You don't need weapons to raise strong, resilient children. What you need is connection. Connection builds trust. Connection tells your children, you can come back here. Yes, I will be upset. Yes, there will be consequences, but you are always welcome here. You're always one of us. You don't stop being a part of this family because you're covered in mess. And that is how you win influence. Because when the child is now able to know that I can come with my crisis home, at least you're sure that the bad advice they could have gotten out there is off the table. So here's my challenge to you this week. Notice one moment where you're tempted to use silent treatment, guilt, or manipulation. And pause and ask yourself, is there a better way? That's why I encourage parents to invest in their growth, invest in your learning. It's one of the things that we do on the 1-year program, the DR Tribe. Because there's so much to learn. Sometimes many parents turn to these tactics because they don't know what else to do. The intention is good, but then the method ends up eroding parts of the child with it. And that is too costly because any technique that would take away parts of the child with it means your child arrives adulthood less than whole because parts of them got lost along the way. So take a breath. Sometimes tell your children, right? I'm upset, but I still love you. One of the times that I often encourage parents to reaffirm their love for children is especially when the child has messed up real big. It's best to always open, even when you have to give a consequence. Start with I love you part. Let your child know that this does not change the fact that you are loved here. This is about what you have done, not who you are. Nothing you do will change where you stand in our family. Every children need to hear the message, especially when they are teenagers, when they are at that stage where they are very vulnerable to peer influence. When their friends are saying, come, you're always welcome, you're always one of us. You know that when kids become teenagers, right? It is a battle for belonging. It's a battle for belonging. It's a battle for acceptance. And amongst their peers, however they are, they will always find a place. They will always find a place. They just have to do what the others are doing. And sometimes that means going the opposite direction from the values you have taught them. So it's a battle for belonging. And that's the stage where children need to be affirmed. They need to know that they cannot lose their place. So many parents are afraid to give them message because it might look like a passport for the child to do any nonsense. The question is whether the child is still doing the nonsense, even without you giving them that passport. Because mistakes are inevitable, they're going to happen. But it is whether your child can come back to you for guidance, for correction, for counsel. That is the door you want to leave open. That's the door you want to leave open. So if you want to go deeper into how to replace these weapons, these emotional weapons with more intelligent tools, we can get a copy of my book. I also covered lots of connection strategies here for parents. We just launched the Parenting with Emotional Intelligence course. I think today was just the second day. Late entry is still open, or better still, enroll for the next edition of the 1 year program, the deeply rooted um, 365 program, because we cover a range of things. I mean, 1 year of learning, 1 year of coaching, 1 year of being in a community of other supportive parents. Trust me, it doesn't get better than that. All right. So if you have any questions, let me hear from you in the comments. I'd love to answer your questions. I'd love to be able to hear what are your thoughts on these three weapons. Where do you find yourself? I love how someone said, it's been used on me, but I've also used it. Yeah, because it's pretty common. It's pretty common. Most parents find themselves using one or two or more of these weapons that I've mentioned here today. Using either the manipulation, I don't know if you have. I think most of us have probably heard to some other person say, "After all my sacrifice, or after everything I've done for you, this is what you're doing." Leveraging the sacrifice card to get a child, or sometimes even a spouse. Right? Remember, I said I'm talking about marriage today, but these are things that are common because when this is all you know, a child raised with these tactics, this is all they know. They eventually learn it as the way to get people to do what they want. That's how narcissists and all these kinds of people are born. This is all they know. That's how they were raised. That's how they were conditioned growing up. So when they get into marriage, their spouse pays the price. Their spouse now becomes the victim of the constant emotional blackmail, the constant emotional manipulation, and silent treatment even. So, all right. I hope that you've been able to repent if you were in the habit of practicing any of these things, but also go ahead to learn something different, right? Because one of the ways to replace some of these bad habits is that you have to replace it with something better. Better ways to respond to misbehavior, better ways to respond to certain things on your journey. Maybe a child that constantly goes the opposite way from what it is that you have instructed them to do. How do you respond to that? Right? Go ahead, subscribe to the channel. We have lots of videos here. I think I have videos here on discipline and how to address kids who are rebellious. You're going to find it on the channel as well. So there's a lot of enriching conversations that we've had on other Thursday sessions that you can benefit from. Thank you so much for tuning in today. I guess there are no questions, so I'll see you again next week, Thursday. All right, take care and see you next time. Bye.